Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're viewing from around the world. I'm Jon Snell here at Bob Reeves Brass. And what I really should be saying is, may the Force be with you. Happy May 4th, happy Star Wars Day. And so excited for our special guest today, Jon Lewis. Jon, as you know, is the top call trumpet players. He's played principal trumpet on a lot of the major motion pictures and television soundtracks that you've heard for several years now. He was also a guest on the other side of the Bell podcast, episode 36, which a little later on here we'll drop the link to that if you haven't heard his podcast interview. But we are here live, so you've got two jobs before I bring Jon on. Number one, show us some love in the comments. Hit that subscribe, like, share button, all of those things that we're supposed to do on social media. Let us know where you're viewing from. And the most important thing you can do for the next 45 minutes to an hour here is ask your questions. Jon is here to answer just about anything you have about trumpet or studio work, or he plays with the Santa Barbara Symphony. He's done that for decades as well. So a wealth of experience here on the screen. So without further ado, let's bring my special guest on today, Jon Lewis. Jon, great to see you. How you doing?
Great to see you too, John. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. Doing great.
Yeah,
Happy to
and
be here.
so this weather is pouring to this morning.
I know. Who said it never rains in Southern California? But
Yeah, but might as well move up to Portland with this kind of weather.
I will say, though, that we have more rain than we can actually deal with now. Everything's full. All the reservoirs are full. And it's
Yeah.
where I live in Simi Valley, they just lifted the water so I can actually water my grass now. That's good.
Well, there you go. Oh man, we already have Dan Rosenboom checking in. Hey, buddy.
Hey, Bill.
So already got some great friends. So enough about the rain. Let's talk about trumpet. One of the things that I wanted to talk about from the podcast, which now I can't believe it's been 6 or 7 years since
Wow.
that. But one of the things that you talked about that was really inspiring for a lot of folks is how you got your start in LA and the things you had to go through. So would you take us a little bit through that about when you moved to LA and the kind of things you had to do?
Sure. Well, I moved out in 1981. I graduated from Kansas University, and hopefully Roger Stoner will be on the line here. But I had come out, didn't even think of Los Angeles. I was going to be in the Washington Army Band, and that was kind of my plan. And during the course of going to Kansas, I met a lot of players: Al Vizzuti, Gary Foster, and Tony Plogue came out and did a master class, and they were all talking about LA, and Tony was talking about Jimmy Stamp and Tom Stevens and Vince DeRosa and all that. And I thought, God, I got to go out there and just take lessons with Jimmy Stamp, and well, all those guys. And so I went out during spring break and instantly fell in love. It was spring here. It was March, I guess it was.
Mm-hmm.
And weather was beautiful. Everything was green, and Kansas was freezing cold. It was a beautiful place, but it was cold. And so I came out and I took a lesson with Jimmy. I took a lesson with Tom Stevens. Actually, took a lesson with Vince DeRosa, and took a lesson with Tony also, and decided that's what I'm going to do. So I finished up within the next year. Came back out spring break, and I moved out here after I graduated in '81. And my thinking was, what am I going to do? For this, whatever this 1 year break-in period is. Boy, was that short-sighted, wasn't it? And I didn't want to just get a job and do that. So I kind of fell into a paper route, college degree, and I threw papers for the Valley Daily News. And I ended up doing that for 4 years, almost to the day. And that's 365 days a year. And my thinking was I didn't have to get a day gig, and I could do whatever came up during the days to go to rehearsal bands and all that stuff. So that's kind of the key of what kept me housed and fed for the first, like I said, that first year when you break in. Well, for me, at least going to recorded music, it was 10 years. And but I was very fortunate. Your dad actually was a big figure in that. He had the California Brass Ensemble, and through Bill Bing and Roy Poper, who I had met, they got me on that list, and I started playing. And you were running around in diapers, and 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 just kind of networked with people, did my paper route, and people should probably understand. Um, let's say Easter. That's usually the biggest problematic time, where you do a midnight mass, usually rehearsal, midnight mass, and then uh, 3 or 4 church services on Easter morning. Well, in between all that, I was throwing those newspapers at 4 o'clock in the morning, or earlier, because I had to get to a church gig at 6 or 6:15. And then I'd go, when I'd get home from that, I'd go to bed for, I don't know, 20 hours until I had to throw papers again. And I did that for a long time. And I rarely missed, I if I traveled, I went on the road with Jack Daniels band in 19, also Larry Hall was one who introduced me to that. And I did a 2-week tour. I think it's 1983, maybe 82, 83. And then I did a 12-week. And those were the only times that I really did not do the paper route. So,
Wow.
a lot of people like to point at that for tenacity, but I just loved being here, and I would go down to the union, and pretty funny, I'd walk in and go, "Do I have any checks?" You have to stand in line at the union for checks. Of course, I didn't have a check. I wasn't working. I'd be behind Vince DeRosa, and he'd pick up a stack of checks like this, and see all these guys come in, and it was pretty amazing time to see those people.
Yeah.
Uh,
But back in the day when you actually had to pick up your checks.
that's right. That's right.
Well,
And then
and that's why
sent,
our shop was a few blocks from the Union, and that's Bob Reeves. He was smart. He's like, I know the musicians have to go from this studio to the Union to pick up their checks. They go
that's
right
right.
by the shop.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Bob so many times out there getting things, screw rims, sleeves, new mouthpieces, altering things. It was really wonderful to have him there. Yeah, it was exactly right on the path going down to Paramount and everything. It's fantastic.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, and that's I don't know, you call it paying your dues or doing what you have to do, but doing moving to town 4 a.m. 4 a.m.
Yeah,
paper route, and but then the ball gets rolling based on your connections and
that's
things
right.
like
That's
that.
right. And I was studying with Jimmy when I came out, so I would deliver papers. I'd listen to music. I'd buzz my mouthpiece. I was telling you before we came on here, and I thought someday, So as I'm driving with my legs. I'm folding papers and put rubbing bands, put them on the seat, and I'm, drive this, just going down the street throwing papers. And well, one day I'm driving, buzzing, you know, and I throw a paper, and I threw the paper and my mouthpiece out the window of the car, and I heard it go clink, 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 and hit right on the rim, and it probably bounced like this.
Oh,
And so I
oh,
pulled the car over, and I thought, well, maybe it's okay. So I pick it up and put it in my face, like, ow, it was so trash, and so didn't do that again. But that was another thing about, and I had an accident when I was driving one time in the rain. My car just slid down a hill, and I hit a classic Mustang. But anyway,
yeah.
so yeah,
So,
those were interesting times.
we got a lot of friends checking in. I mentioned Dan already. Greg Van Boven, wonderful player in Las Vegas. My dad's watching. Hey, Dad.
Hey,
He says hi, John and John. Our buddy Jeff Conrad. Our good buddy Fabio Bao from Italy says, "Ciao, dear friends. A hug from Italy." So hey, Fabio.
nice.
So yeah, first question coming in about Jimmy Stamp. A person was asking John, what did you learn from Jimmy? Outside of what we would get from the James Stamp book, which I see is sitting behind you right there. I mean,
Oh
you know,
yeah, I didn't
I,
know it was visible. Yep, yep. Uh, well, I was really fortunate because I had great teachers. Pat Mastrolio was first year in the Army band, and then in Kansas, Roger Stoner was my teacher and a wonderful person. We're still dear friends. And then coming out here, having Jimmy, um, everything just kind of fed in. I was doing when I was in Kansas. I did another book that's on here, the and I don't know how many people know about the Total Range book by Charles Peters, but um, I was introduced to that, I think, right when it came off the presses, and I'm not sure if Roger brought it in or how it actually got in my hands, but loved the book, and it was all about um, just the process of playing. You have everything metronome markings, everything's written out. You hold 4 beats, rest 4 beats, and you just boom, you just play this thing beginning to end. Week 1, whatever, it takes 8 minutes or something, and then you have beginner, intermediate, advanced, and professional, and each one has 4 workouts, and they go up to, like 2.5 hours of playing time, and they go through long tones, slow slurs, faster slurs, chromatics, and then arpeggios. And the hardest stuff is usually at the end, and so you have to breathe correctly. You have to use your air correctly. You're just not going to make it. You don't go to the next week until you can, without fatigue, go to the previous week. And the reason I bring that up is because that idea of the constant air and really trying to play down the center so things are in tune and everything, I was in the process of trying to learn how to do that. And I did have pretty good success with that. But when I went to Jimmy, he took it to a whole nother level of, the playing down the middle of the horn, stay down on the notes when you're going up and stay up on the notes when going down, not telegraphing your direction. It wasn't so much that he was like building your chops, but he was just teaching you probably, in my experience, the most efficient way to play, and we all want efficiency, but most people want shortcuts. And I'm on my I know I've heard Malcolm talk about, but I'm on my 44th year of doing the Jimmy Stamp approach to playing, and it's combined with a lot of other things. Granted, we all have to do that, but it was fantastic for me, and the tenets of it, and the what I'd like to talk about. One of the things with Jimmy that has stuck with me maybe the most, and that's his little setup things that he did. Like if you're playing an etude or something, and or even Jimmy's exercise 3. So you start with C and you go chromatically down, and it might be just really beautiful all the way down, and then I'll get down to like E flat and a B, something like that, and Jimmy would stop you and he'd say, the fellows are having some success with putting a bend on that first note. And so he had me and go on like that. And as simple as that seems, that's a big deal. So that, or when they have the fermatas on the notes in the earlier, I guess they still have them, but in the earlier books they had the Gornston etudes. And at the top note of a phrase, so da 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 da, on the top note, da 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 da, you'd hold 3 times the length. And by doing that, you're not going to cut the corner. You're actually established there, and then you go back down. So the training wheels of it is you practice like that, and then when you have that right, you take the wheels off, and you don't do the hold, but you approach it exactly the same way. And there were many of them. My Clark characteristic studies books just is full of writing in the margins, put a whole, da 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 da, that one you go ba da 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 da, put that hold in there, and it just got me in a position when I was playing that I was right where I was supposed to be. And so that was really the most prominent thing I took away from Jimmy. He taught me something that I tell everybody today. My job as a teacher is to teach the player to teach themselves. And I think as a teacher, that's what our responsibility is. So I try to give them as much information or theoretically knowledge that I might have, or experience anyway. And then they can put things together like Tinker Toys any way they want, so.
Wow. Yeah, great. And thank you for sharing that. We have tons of folks checking in here. I'm doing double duty here, listening, and like I get engrossed in what you're saying, and then I'm also trying to make the chat happy over on one side. But and one thing I wanted, you talked about on your podcast was like in your lesson specifically, like sitting there in the room, like if you weren't centered on a note, correct me if I'm wrong, you wouldn't go on. Jimmy would stop you, right?
That's right. He would be perfectly content to never get through the first measure of an eight. And he was the sweetest guy. I talked like 15 times too much. Jimmy just barely said anything, and he communicated it, uh, everything very well. And like he played along. I don't know how many hours a day he played, but he would play along with his studies with you.
Mm-hmm.
And he had I guess a heart attack and everything, so he wasn't as strong as he was, but all day long he was playing just right down the middle. And so he play along like you said. If he just everything was going great, why can't I just let one note slide? Well, I couldn't, and I tried to do that today. I try if I'm practicing. COVID, if anything positive, is that it's given so many of us enough time to really get down the brass tacks, really address things that haven't been going well, or increasing things that have been going well, and I'm sure Boom would agree with me, or I don't know who else on there. I can't see the list,
Yeah.
but
Well,
so I had a lot of time to work on things. I always say that single tongue is my nemesis, and it is. But so I was able to work on that. I was able to do things. I was going through the Armin's book. I should have done that in fourth grade, but I didn't go through the Armin's book in fourth grade. I mean, it's that thick.
yeah.
And there's a lot of black in it, a lot of
Yeah.
black notes. I don't want to do that page. So I started addressing those things, and things were getting better, and
Right.
things that I couldn't do, I would do like I tell my students. I would play a passage, and something I wasn't doing well. So I would go back to the section with like that kind of thing, and I would work on that. And not only that, but I go to Note Flight online. That's the music software I use, and I'd write a whole etude on that, and I go up a half step and down a half step, up a whole step, and do it in all these different keys, and really attack it,
Mm-hmm.
and not move on to the next one until it was right. It's not like you hear a chip and you go to the next one. No, do it again, and then it put the burden, kind of like with recording, put the burden on you that it had to be right. You can't just gloss over stuff, and I think people do that. I always point out one student, I won't say his name, but he used to come in, and he always wanted to play like the Jolives and the Tomasis and all that stuff, and so he wanted to play Tomasi. So he comes into the people that are listening are only going to hear me play like crap, but so he comes in, and it comes up Tomasi, goes, and he'd do like three, and he'd say, I don't know what's going on. I've been nailing all week. And I said, no, you haven't. You've been playing it exactly like that. And now you're on performance mode, and you expect it to be perfect. If you're not going to practice in performance mode, it's going to stay just like that. But if you address it and figure out what's going on, and correct any issues, then you'll get better. But if you just keep letting things slide, we're not baseball players. We can't hit 3 out of 10 notes and be stars.
And
We
be
have
in
to
the
hit
Hall of Fame, right? No,
right.
doesn't work that way.
You have to bat around 90, 99, 990 or whatever it is.
All right, I gotta. We do some shout outs here, and forgive me for hacking
Cool.
people's names here. I'll do my best. So we got Jeff from Cincinnati checking in, Stefan from Würzburg, Germany, Timo from Helsinki, Finland. So we're covering all over the globe. And I'm sorry, it's either Reen or Renee. I know I've talked to you on the phone. Godina, former student at CSUN, and he's there at Centennial Elementary and with his students, and wants us to say hello. So
Thank
hello,
you.
all the students at Centennial Elementary. Awesome to have you on here. Okay. Well, we've been going 20 minutes. We got to bring up Star Wars. So Patrick is asking if you have any stories about playing the Star Wars music. I mean, you did three movies, and I mean that's a number of sessions, right?
Yeah. You have to understand with John that whenever you do any track any cue you're gonna record, you'll rehearse it, and then you'll record it. I don't know, 10 to 20 times. I mean, really, and you never know. As is the business, Murphy's Law. The one time you clam is going to be the one they print. But you have to do this stuff over and over and over and over. So part of our conditioning is well, part of our job is conditioning. We have to be able to be first and last take, beginning of the day. We're usually 7-hour days, 10 to 1, 2 to 5, and then maybe overtime, and then maybe something that night. So you have to be prepared and ready to do stuff at any point. We might sit for 40 minutes and then, okay, let's do the main title again. So for me, what I did, and I've talked about this before, but in the old days, we used to do consecutive days. We'd have like 2 weeks when we did Waterworld every day, except for weekends. And you really get in the groove. Your chops settle in, your conditioning, what you're doing, where you're recording, all this stuff. But now it's more, we may record Monday, Friday, the following Thursday, it's like 1 a week, maybe 2 a week. And so getting your pacing up, getting your conditioning, it's pretty important, especially for Jon stuff and for Star Wars. So what I did, I would come into this room here. It's not the biggest room, and I would do this. And let's just keep doing it over and over and over. Take a breath and do it again. And I would just condition myself, because I knew I was going to probably do it 12 times,
You knew what was coming.
I kind of knew what was coming, but you didn't know when it was coming. There's the caveat. But those sessions, all of Jon's sessions, I recently did something, and I guess I had spoken wrong or whatever, but the people were announcing were saying I played on 45 of Jon's films. I didn't play on 45. I played on 26, I think, maybe 27. So, but I just felt so foolish when they're announcing me. I'm like, they said, Jon's played on 45, Jon. And I'm like, well, give or take 20 pictures,
Yeah, it's somewhere in there.
Yeah, but 20, 25, 27 pictures, and starting with Hook, and then most of them, if they were done in Los Angeles, I played on them, but it wasn't until Star Wars that, a change was made, and I had the great fortune to be able to play first and surround myself with these amazing trumpet players. We had Barry Perkins, who was with me, Dan Rosenboom, Dave Washburn, and then subsequently we had Jim Grinta subbed, Rob Shear's a regular in section 2. So we, like with the one we did 3 years ago, we were all on. That was a blast, and every day working with those guys is a huge treat. I trust them. I hope they trust me. We know what we're doing. I don't have to tell people, unless it's recurring, like something's held long or short or whatever. Everybody's going to do what's written. They're going to play it beautifully and perfectly each time. If I'd like to have something like we had one lick in, I think it was in 7. It's always high treble tonguing with Jon. And it was just past my comfort range. So I was going to fall behind, and I was probably the only one going to fall behind. But I told the guys, just don't push me on this. I'm going to be a little behind, and they were great, and they did it. So, we're all. I can count on them being there. I can count on them being ready to go. I can count on them doing amazing jobs, and that's a huge gift, But Jon's the cream of the cream, man. He's really he creates obviously amazing music, but he also creates an atmosphere that, I'd rather stick an ice pick in my eye than make a mistake when I'm working with Jon. And I think most of the orchestra feels the same way. I know. And I know Dan Rosenboom, Boom and I were just somewhere in the day, we'd have to fist bump. I'm like, can you believe we're getting paid to do this?
Right. You got to pinch yourself.
Yeah.
And you mentioned there, yeah, 3 years ago, for those of you viewing, we did a live stream on May the 4th, and I just have to tell the story because it was absolutely amazing. And I forgot, I think it was the horns. Someone, I don't know, Sarah Willis or one of the horn French horn players was doing a live stream with the horn section for May the 4th. And I saw it because this was like 2020 May, COVID shutdown. We're all sitting around at home. And I said, well, if they're doing it with the horns, why can't we do that with the trumpets? And actually, I thought I'd just get you. I sent you a text and you said, sure, I'd love to. Let me get the trumpets. And I said, within, I think, an hour and a half, it went from you and I chatting to having literally all the guys you just mentioned, Barry Perkins, Dave Washburn, Rob Shearer, Dan Rosenboom, Jim Grinta. We were all on a Zoom live streaming. So I threw the link down in the chat for those folks who go check that out. To hear from the whole section, it was really, really amazing, and probably historical because at what point are all 6 or 7 of you all sitting around not doing anything?
Exactly.
Probably during COVID will be the only time. So,
and you and I also talked too. I don't know if you put a link there, but Barry Perkins did an amazing job with. He arranged the main title for I think it was 10 trumpets.
Yeah.
And so or was it 12? I can't remember, but it was a lot of trumpets. And no, it was. Well, I'm sorry.
It was a lot of trumpets. Yeah.
A lot of trumpets. Yeah. And I guess it was 6 of us, and he doubled the parts, so it was maybe 12. Anyway, so we all recorded them separately, and then Barry got us all together, and he videoed us. And he put it all together, and we're all standing on stage together playing this thing. But we were all apart. It's magnificent, the job he did, and it's so cool to see that. I even now, I click that every once in a while and listen to that because it's just so much fun.
Yeah,
to do.
Barry had fun over he did all kinds of crazy videos and like doing green screen stuff. And for a guy who spent his life, I know he does a lot of live playing with Pacific Symphony, but basically in the studios behind the scenes now he went viral, so to speak.
Yeah, he's got some talent too with that. I gotta say.
Maybe someone viewing. I know my buddy Matt Collins in Vienna is watching. Maybe someone knows that can paste the link to Barry Perkins' video there in the chat for me. I don't have it at my fingertips, and I'm afraid I'll hit the wrong button here. Yeah. So one of the stories I wanted you to share from your podcast is like you did eventually get to do the main theme though, right? But it wasn't. Well, I don't want to ruin the story, but you guys just kept waiting for it. Isn't that what happened? At least with the first Star Wars, right?
Yeah, it seems to me, it just seems to play out this way that Jon loves to do like the main titles at the end of the day. And so we waited a long time to do it. We might have started the very first session. I think it's like, let's warm up with this little cue here. And we played through the main titles, which was like, I still get goosebumps from that experience. But I don't think we actually recorded it earnestly at that point. And then we go through these sessions. We're like, well, when are we going to do this? When are we going to do this? And so the very end of the day, we end up doing the theme, I don't know, 6 or 8 times, and then subsequently many sessions later, we did it again. And it's like I said, at the end of the day, when you're like, can't we just kind of do something easy at the end of the day? We're still having to pound. And that's really where whatever you call it, the wheels hit the road, where you have to reach way deep inside and come up with the stamina and the tenacity. Like, I need to do this. I'm going to do this. Mm-hmm. And what I think everybody has to, probably a lot of people have had the experience of recording stuff. What's important to understand is that you don't know what you're going to play. Now, sometimes they post music, but historically don't know what you're going to play. You don't know when you're going to play it. You don't know how many times you're going to do it. And you don't know if you're going to be done with it when you're done, and now with digital recording, something goes wrong. I mean, they can be back on it within 3 seconds, and so you're like, wait, let's, can I wait till my lips turn red again? But again, with Jon writing the music, you were safe because he's a fabulous writer. He might write really hard, and a wonderful person too. So he's great to work for, but you want to be the guy, Jon, can we, no. So we just do it. And like I said, at the end of the day, that makes for a long ending of the day. And then, I'm going up to Santa Barbara and playing Mahler or something like that. And then come back down and play Jon the next day or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's not like anyone's going to hear the main title anyway.
No,
No one watches those movies. We're just here chatting about stuff that no one,
I think
some
it might have been
indie film, right?
yeah, right. Yeah, indie.
Well,
One of the last sessions we did for Star Wars, everybody was there. Um, Phil Marshall and Kathleen Kennedy. Um, I think Spielberg was there. All the Disney execs, um, the actors, everybody. It was like who's who. And John had brought a little known conductor, Dudamel, invited him to come in. So the dude conducted the end credits. And this was again, this was kind of like more for the splash and the
yeah,
festivity of it, but that was hard. I mean, that was, I think it's like 9 minutes of really hard playing, and so and that was at the end of the day too, historically, you know. So and they, you know, Tomas Ganch has this great line uh, where he says, "They don't care. Nobody cares how you feel. Nobody cares that you've done this 12 times. They want to hear the 13th time. Nobody cares." And when it's done, everybody cares because they enjoy the product. But you know, hey, um, if I took a session before this, that's on me. You know, I need to get my ducks in a row and be able to still do the job. So
yeah, yeah, and so just like from the mindset though, I mean, is there any tricks you have to either like maintain your focus or just, I mean, the confidence you have to have when that red light goes on, is that just something you learn just through experience, or
I
what's
think
that look
so.
like?
I have right here on the top of my computer. I have a thing that it's like a mantra for me. I said you have to earn your own trust. If somebody has to perform a piece that you have to end, you know, Haydn, let's just say the Haydn, you have to go up the E flat. If you're not able to go beyond the E flat and do that at the very end of your practice, then maybe you shouldn't be attacking that, or don't expect to get the E flat. So what I'm saying is that we have to have, let's say if we need this much of our skills, whether it be range, technique, endurance, volume, soft and loud, if that is the spectrum of what we need to perform on a daily basis, then in our practice we have to expand that tremendously. You know, I don't ever want to work harder than, I'd like to say 75% of what I can do, whether it be the speed of articulations or range or endurance, all that stuff. And so when I practice, I try to constantly push the envelope farther so that when I'm to what you know a normal worker would have to do, um, I can do that beginning, middle, and end of the day. That's really important. That it's not just when you're fresh; it's when you're exhausted or when you're brain dead because you've done things so much. You know that you still have to have your foundational elements in place and keep your wits about you, like you're saying.
Mhm.
I will relay early on when I started working with Dennis McCarthy and we were doing the Deep Space Nine show. Dennis wrote really pretty outrageous, not necessarily technical, but you know, large intervals ending on high C's or D's, and coming in after the strings have been like playing pads for 30 bars. You have to come in, oh, you know, top of the staff. And I remember I got early on, I hadn't been exposed to that kind of thing before. And I could feel myself getting really nervous, and may sound goofy, but the word awareness came into my head,
Hmm.
and don't know where that came from, but it told me I just need to be aware of me. I need to be aware of my breath. I need to be aware of my support. I need to be aware of my relaxation and then getting the air through the horn. And that carried me through, and that ended up being something that's always helped me since then, because we all psych ourselves out, whether it be, you know, a hard lick coming up or a hard piece, whatever. And, you know, at home, or it's not going well, or whatever, we don't tackle it. So, well, how are we going to perform it if we can't tackle it at home? And on the recording stuff, you can't really attack it at home. You're reading it at that time. And how do you know you can do something 10 times? Well, I showed you how I worked on the main title, but that's kind of my approach with everything. Anything worth doing is worth overdoing. And I hope that kind of answered your question. I think we all have to be way over prepared. I think I'm mentioning Dan a lot, but he's he wrote the Boom Method book, and he practices literally practices what he preaches, and his warm ups amazing. It's extensive, and I'm probably the opposite now. I don't really warm up much. I warm up and I buzz in the car. I do my routine in the car, but other than that, it's like pick it up and wish like hell it works, and it's worked out okay so far, I think.
Well, I think kind of the key that you were saying there was that training yourself so much that there is no you have no other choice than to be confident, right? Like
Right.
it's because you trust yourself. There's not even an ounce of doubt, but that's the perseverance to be able to get to that place that I think most of us fall short.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
don't know. I don't know what percentage of people are trumpet players, but I will say though that for the trumpet players, um, and this is just me. Everything I say really is just my beliefs, and I could truly be full of crap. I get that, but it's what I believe I'm doing, and it's what I try to do, and it's what I try to convey. And I never tell people to do things that I don't or haven't tried, as a troubleshooting thing or whatever. So that being said, I have what I call my 1, 2, 3s, and I try to impress upon people, and not everybody agrees, and that's fine. But I think it's really important that we always take, like Doc Severinsen does, we always take a full breath. I don't care if it's one note you're going to play or if it's a 30-second phrase. So you set yourself up consistently. I take what I call an audible breath, and it's a full breath, right? So that's one. And then two is I set my level of engagement, my support, whatever you want to call it, as if it's like a G at the top of the staff. And I don't care if I'm playing a pianissimo low G or whatever. That's my set. So it's like if I had a horn in my hand, that's where that G is going to be. And then the third thing is always trying to make sure not just blowing into the horn, but blowing through the horn. Those are my 3 steps. And doing those things consistently, if I'm having issues, it's probably because I'm not doing those 3 things. And so, if you want to have consistent results, then you need to practice and do things consistently, continuous and diligent practice over time will bring the same kind of results. And so, Sergei Nakaryakov, when I spoke with him a few years ago, he works on a piece for, I think it's either 3 or 5 years before he'll perform it. So when he does Mendelssohn or anything like that, I mean, he's worked he probably reads them better than I could ever dream to play, but he works things out so meticulously and thoroughly that, my gosh, there are many players I really admire, but few players that I admire to the extent that I do Sergei, because he's just unworldly, with what he's capable of doing.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because people hear him play and say, "Oh, he plays so effortlessly. He must be a natural or talented." All of these words that you hear that just like now they bring shivers up my spine because it's like, no, that just totally deflates like you said, years and years of work that went into that piece. Or I mean, other like Håkan Hardenberger, who would say when in his master class he'd play every note of something like the Tomasi or whatever crazy piece he's playing as a whole note the first time,
Right.
and sometimes it would take him a month to get through the piece. You're just like you don't hear those stories, so that's why I'm glad
Right.
we're getting
Well,
those kinds of things out.
Mendez also, my understanding is from the stories, I never had the chance to meet him, but that he would play everything like do, go, do, go, do, all the way through perpetual motion, super, super, super slow, and wouldn't play full bore until the performance, But I mean, Sergey and Ralph, you slow those guys down and take Amazing Slowdowner. It's the same piece. I
Same
mean,
piece.
it's a instead of here, don't go. How do you do that?
Yeah. one note at a time. That's
I
the
know
answer. That's the easiest says. Well, great advice. And man, we've gone 40 minutes already, and I'm not doing my what do I say, my social media job here to tell the folks, because we have a ton of people watching right now. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. I don't just say it because I say it. It really helps us. There might be trumpet players sitting in front of YouTube or Facebook around the world right now that would love to hear what Jon has to say, and the algorithms won't put us in front of them unless there's people engaging. So I'm just not saying it to say it. It actually helps us and helps trumpet players spread the word. So do that, number one. And number two is we have Jon for another 15, 20 minutes here. He's answering your questions. So put them in the chat. Ask him anything: how to play the trumpet, how to play low, how to play high. Just let's stay away from heavy valve caps. That's too controversial. We won't talk about heavy valve caps today. But just put it in the chat, whether you're on Twitter or Twitch or Facebook or YouTube. I can see them, and I'll ask Jon right here. We have one, Andrea checking in, says she wants us to say hi. Andrea could be a male or female. Sorry, can't tell. Anyway, hi, Andrea. Hello, good buddy Klaus from Deutschland. Good to see you, Klaus. And Steve and Tony checking in from Chicago. And I should also shout out Dan put Barry's Star Wars video in YouTube. And my buddy Matt Collins put the link in Facebook, so everyone can scroll up and find that video of Barry's Star Wars arrangement that we were talking about. Question coming in from Twitter, Jon. Oh, what we've been talking about Star Wars. What current projects have you been doing in the last few years? Anything? Any movies we would have known about, or TV series?
Yeah, we're Indiana Jones is supposed to come out next month. That was a fantastic experience for all of us, and theoretically was supposed to be Jon's last picture, and I hope and pray it's not. I think if Steven asked him to do a picture he wants to do, he would do it. But so that's out. Mario Brothers movies out now. I don't know what all is out. Some of these things we recorded a year and a half ago. I tried to make a list of things that were going on, but I have a sister-in-law that asks me questions sometimes, and I have no idea what to tell her. Joyride was.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. It's like, what do you do? What do you do during the day? Right? One of those...
I have no idea. I am not kidding. Sometimes we'll leave the session, we'll going to the next job or something. We're walking and say, "Oh, what are you working on?" I'm like, and then oh yeah, I might not even remember. It's just, if you could flash that picture, that might.
Yeah, let me see if I can bring that out. And actually, I mean, it's kind of a funny story for those who were on here from the beginning. I was trying to load a photo in, and ended up loading it onto our introduction movie. So I just ended the movie and started the stream. Oh, wow. That's what happens when I do technology here. So let's see if I can bring this up. There we go. So this is.
Yeah, that's all my date books from 1978 to present. And another thing I recommend to people, and
let's see if I can make that smaller here. There we go.
It was recommended to me by Gary Foster. When I first met Gary Foster, he said, keep a diary of what you do. You're going to want to see that sometime. And that really kind of made an impression. And I still use the iCal and all that, but I always have my date book. And since around, I know 98, I might have been before that, I keep track of every session I do. So Gio's great about that. I don't have to publish that, but if he has questions, I can usually tell him or Adam Cap and the people that do that. But I love being able to look at the book and see how busy I was in 1982. Snow, just nothing. And I recommend people do that, just to have it, because digital can go away in an instant. And that drawer full is 45 years counting high school of history there. So it's kind of neat to have.
That's amazing. Let me see if I can bring that up one more time without screwing this up. This is why I'm not allowed to have technology. But anyway, you guys can kind of get an idea. That's all of your date books in there.
So about 45 of them in there. So we are doing Blue Beetle, Tiger's Apprentice with Steve Jablonsky, Elemental with Tom Newman. Of course, Avatar movie's out. Babylon is out. Strange World is out. Disenchanted, I don't know if that's out. Black Adam's out. Night at the Museum, Hocus Pocus 2, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Dungeons and Dragons, Nope, and Cars. That's like within the last And that's not actually that much, considering that's probably like 20, 22 titles. There were
Hmm.
periods of years where we were doing 45 titles in a year, you know.
Wow.
Uh, I think the most in a year for me anyway, was 52 titles in one year.
Jeez.
That's really pretty amazing, considering now we're, I don't know how many we do in a year.
Yeah. Well,
Maybe
and
12 to 15.
well, and as you were mentioned, I think you mentioned this earlier on, and you definitely mentioned this in the podcast. But for movie dates, you're talking about several sessions, not just a session. One movie a day kind of thing. I mean,
Well, in the early days, yes,
yeah.
like when we're doing Waterworld or like um, John's pictures and everything, 10, 12, maybe even 15 sessions over the course of things. Now, yeah, we may be doing some titles, but a lot of times they're what they call striping. They'll do strings for sessions. Strings will do a double, and then the brass will come in a night by ourselves and do a single.
Hmm.
So we're losing a lot of work, and we'll get a call for 5 days of doubles, and it will eventually be reduced to one day of a single because they just organize things where you're not there until you're needed. We don't do everything together, and it's quite a change. So we might have a session where we just play a 3-hour call for a whole picture. And trumpets are not so much in the mix. The kind of I hope it's a passing fad, but the low, everything's low tenor. It's like 12 trombones, 12 horns, which everybody, they're like, woohoo! We're like,
They're partying. Yeah.
they're partying, right? And percussion, there's a lot of percussion that's been replaced with digital samples. And, so it's ever changing. And with streaming, the same thing. There's not so much the upper end melodic stuff that I love, but
Hmm.
so it's just still a changing scene all the time.
Yeah. Well, maybe the pendulum will swing back the other way, and we'll have
I hope so.
12 trumpets on a session, like the
Yeah,
Rocky days or whatever.
no, yeah. Grand Canyon was one of the first ones I did where uh, got to play with. I think we had 12 trumpets there, but we have to remember too that when John came on the scene with Superman and Star Wars, I think he pretty much single-handedly turned the industry around because it was drop the needle stuff, a lot of source music in movies, and Vangelis with Chariots of Fire, a lot more synths coming in, and he really, I think, resurrected the full symphony orchestra in the 77,
Hmm.
76, 78, and it's what a great ride it's been. 50 years of that platform. So we still have some orchestras, just done differently and a different flavor to what's featured or not. There are great composers that are. Tom Newman is so tremendous about blending in not replacement sounds, but additive sounds, like the synths that he lays in and the grooves and stuff are just so amazing. And then layering on this incredible orchestral stuff on top of it. So I love that part of things, that the advancements, not people aren't getting replaced. It's just augmenting what's done. So
Awesome. And we got questions are coming in. This always happens. We get to close to an hour, and now there's just a stream of questions. So let's see. Well, first of all, Ben Gunnarsson, good buddy, plays down in the Disneyland band, a USC student. He said Super Mario Brothers was awesome, and I agree. I took my family to go see it, and I mean, as a child in the 80s, I mean, nothing was cooler than that movie, but the music and the brass playing in particular was just so much fun. So
it really
uh,
was.
Ram Horns on YouTube, and you've addressed this a little bit when talking about Jimmy Stamp, but their question is, how do you learn to play centered? And it might be some of the stuff you've already talked about, but kind of in a nutshell, what would you suggest to learn how
I
to?
think I like bends and ascending bends, and I think, for example, I will play something that would be what I call over center. Okay. Okay. Now, if you have a tuner, it's gonna show sharp, but if you listen to that, it's the sweet spot is in the center, and when you're over, it's gonna get more dull, like I just did, and if it's under, it gets kind of tubby. So if a person uses the idea of bends, So I'm going to start over the note. I'm not saying do this, but if you do, this will help you see that. If I play over the center, see, so I bent the note down. You could hear it open up, and then I return to what is the center, in my opinion. And then along with that, there's an ascending bend where instead of bending a note half a step down, you finger a half step higher and stay on the note. So this is a bend and ascending bend. Sorry. So I'm not doing it perfectly, but in listening, if we start to pay attention to the sound we're hearing, then you can recognize. Once you hear it, it's kind of hard to get out of your head, because we can all play. Let's say if I play a B flat, okay, that seemed pretty centered to me. But if I pull the slide out, I'll try and play the same intonation. Okay, pull out farther. Okay, so what you're not seeing is how much work I'm doing to actually play that. I'm lipping farther and farther and farther up to get the same pitch. But if you look at my slide, how far that is, it doesn't matter where your slide is. I don't care where you play, but I want you to be, I want a player to be aligned. So I'll play that C again and then pull them out so you can see what's happening. Okay, I'm buzzing an F to play a C. So I'm not centered, right? I'm not in alignment. I like the idea of buzzing what you're playing and not having to slide too far out. So they're, getting everything matched up and listening for that core of sound in the center of the pitch. So by using bends, even if let's apply it to Jimmy. You can hear when you're passing through the center if you're not in the center, and you got to use your air when you bend and all that. But I hope that makes some sense. But I think bends are a really good way to do that. If you have an interval that you're telegraphing the direction, if you do a bend, let's say if I can do a C to C octave, it will help you, stay on the lower side of things, and then you make the jump. I don't know if that's going to help, but that's the 2 cents for that one.
No, that makes sense, and a great question too. And you're keeping me busy over here with doing dials and things.
Good.
On my toes today, stepping up the production level here. All right, Norman is asking, any specific exercises for arching of the tongue? He seems to fall short of this in his development. Any ideas on that?
Well, I don't pay super attention to that. I know that that's a difference that different genres play. I could be wrong, but I believe that, the guys who capture the upper register a lot better than I do probably use more arch so they can get that airspeed and everything. But what I will say is, an exercise I've always loved, and you're going to probably have to turn this down.
That's right.
I call them elephant glisses, but if I do glisses, my idea is to have, and I hinted at this before, when I set on the G, like I said, even if I'm playing a pedal C, it's still that set. And so it's like I set for the G and then I have to play an interval down to the pedal C, if that makes any sense. But if in order to try to get your sound consistent throughout the register, and this will help the question, the tongue arch thing, is if you play, I do it from pedal D to high D, but it doesn't have to be necessarily a far, but if it sounds like this. You can't see what's happening, but there's definitely that happening. If it's better, but you're kind of forcing your body to do that. It's not going to come out if you don't do that. It doesn't have to be that far. It could be, and trying to catch every partial on the way up and the way down, because a lot of times people go, and then down they go. They're not using the same air going down. So if you try to catch every partial going through, and then increase the volume, the range on that. Just just keep expanding that way, and then whatever your situation is with pivoting, just have that air constantly moving through the horn, and I think you'll get some natural tendency to have the tongue arch. See if that helps, because that's one that's worked for me. But when they do those fluoroscopic X-rays where they show tongue arch, the same people sometimes, if they approach the note differently, it's way down here. So I don't know if it's the end all. It is something that does happen. Does it have to happen? Does it have to always happen? I don't know the answers to that, but there are different ways to do that.
Yeah, well, great advice, yeah, and that's the thing. It's hard to teach a trumpet lesson through the internet because what may work for some person may not work for another. But it's all about the sharing of ideas, and something you never know what might click with someone.
Yeah.
So next question's coming now. We're going to shift over to articulation. So you're used to this, John. You're in the hot seat every day. So never know what's going to be asked. So this one comes from my buddy Jeff in Indiana. Any guidance on improving articulation? He tends to get bottled up on extended single tonguing, and no one wants to hear him play extended multiple tonguing. So any advice on articulation?
Well, I'll just tell you my thinking on it is I have what I call the crosshairs, and anybody who stayed with me knows this. But so like this is where your chops are, and this is where your air starts. So when we articulate, we do Rob and Dan and I do this thing where we have our horn. It's like you have to come in on a C on beat one, so tick 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 tick, and then we play. The very last second, get the horn up. So some guys spend a lot of time setting up, but if you keep in mind the crosshairs, that if your air matches, if it doesn't match, it might sound like this. It's not lined up. It's like I want to hear like right on it. So if obviously without hearing the person, it's hard to diagnose anything. But I would say if you're paying attention to that, I like the idea of air attacks, poo attacks, whatever you want to call them, but always trying to achieve something. It doesn't make sense to me personally to let the note happen, to wait for the note to happen. If I pick up the horn first thing and I'm not gonna be really happy with that. I try to get it so that the immediacy is that there was an air attack, but with conditioning, trying to get things to line up, get things in line and consistent. And as far as multiple tonguing, a lot of guys don't work on their Ks, as ugly as it is. Who came up with this? I just, in the morning, I'll do just a simple and then K. And try to make them the same, or double tonguing and KT, and trying to get them so they're as close as they can be to the same. Once your K's clear and you're not getting the all that stuff, you have to work through that. Then you can start incorporating them. But my single tonguing has always been a drag for me, but I can double tongue at slower speeds, and if you don't have a fast single tongue, how are you going to triple tongue? You get da 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 da. But once you slow it down, just like we're talking about Mendez or whoever, ta ta ka ta ta ka ta ta ka ta 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 ka ta, or ka ka ta ka ka ta. Start reaching out a little bit. The Walter Eby method book, little known, but I love that method book. It has a tendency to carry the player in higher registers instead of going down in low Gs. It's like you'll start like G up to G in the staff, and he was one of the first guys I know of that was writing over double Gs in a trumpet method book. So, but neat book.
What was that one again?
Walter Eby, EBY.
Walter Eby.
Yeah, I think you can get him on Q Press now. I think he published them. And it really, I know I ramble here, but
no, this is great.
at the time he had the method book, but he had from a Royal typewriter. You can see the period marks. John Cather, if he's on here, had shared that with me. He'd have lesson plans that went more in depth, just describing stuff that he would type and send it to you, and then you do that lesson for the week, and then you get another typed one. There were like 40 of them or something like that. It's pretty cool. They have a little bit more extensive. People have a tendency to not read the words, and you can learn a lot from reading the words, you know. And if you can't read French in the Charlie book, just go to Google and translate it, or I guess there are
Yeah.
translations now too.
Yeah, the translation, but I mean, it's so easy. Like you can take a picture of it with your phone now, and it'll recognize the text. I mean,
Right.
2 seconds.
Yeah, you should. It's really important to read. And it's funny. Who is the guy who comes up with the crazy? Not crazy. I shouldn't call him crazy, but the method book is so different. And he says nobody's going to read this, so I can write whatever I want.
Yeah.
You know, what I'm talking about the
Yeah, yeah. Oh, good. I'm sure someone in the chat will remind us.
yeah.
Yeah,
But anyway, you know that kind of stuff. It's like you can learn a lot from actually reading this stuff. And
yeah.
Jimmy stuff. Read the front of the book before the notes. Read that stuff because it's important. He would say a lot of the things that I'm um, suggesting here also.
Hmm. Yeah, it's not just the order of the notes. It's the yeah, it's the wisdom that goes along with it, and sometimes even more so. Um,
So
so
yes, somebody asked Armando Gatala once. Said asked him something about tonguing, and he said, "Well, it's nothing that 100 hours of practice won't help." And that is probably the best answer I could give you. If you're not
yeah,
working on it, it's not going to get better, you
yeah.
know. And we all know it's difficult, more difficult in different registers, and going through the registers gives you more stuff to work on.
Well, we have Gary Grant checking in. He's
Hey, Gary.
says hello. He said, "I thought you were an overnight success delivering papers." Ha ha.
Gary is the epitome of a trumpet player. I love him to death. Gary, you're the greatest. But
Yeah.
right, got to do something. You,
Right.
you
Right.
can't play throw papers.
Hey, Gary.
Plus,
Good to see you.
I lived in an apartment. I lived in a studio apartment that time, and my practice room was a walk-through closet that I left all my clothes in and closed the doors and played with a cup mute with that was my practice room. It was
Mhm.
so
Do what
I
you
could
got to
buzz
do.
newspapers, but yeah.
And I know, man, you've been so gracious with your time. We've gone on over an hour. There's one last question here I want to get in. You guys have been in the comments, have been so patient. And if I didn't get to your question, I'm sorry. This is how these things go.
Send it to me,
Okay. Yeah.
CAJONLEWIS at Yahoo, Cajun Lewis,
Okay. Yeah.
and
Uh,
I'd be happy to answer anything.
Yeah, or we'll do a follow up in another 6 months or a year or something like that.
No problem.
But so this question comes in from David. John, with your experiences in so many facets of performance, what would you change or emphasize, or perhaps even reduce in a trumpet degree at a university or conservatory?
Oh wow,
That's,
that's a really good question.
yeah.
I consider myself very fortunate to have gone to KU, Kansas University, and studied with Roger Stoner because we had a terrible orchestra, I have to say. So I did very little orchestral playing, but I did marching band, I did jazz band, or I did brass quintets, symphonic band, wind ensemble, lessons, quintets, recitals, all of that stuff. I think it's all important. I don't think we can. I think people today have to be even more diversified than I think I was. I could play all styles and everything, but I mean, if you don't know music prep or you don't know recording techniques, and you have to know more today. I think if anything, the school should increase. Go to 28-hour days instead of 24. No, I'm kidding. I think what I would do different now would be I probably had my horn to my face 10 hours a day. In college, I really think that was the case. And at a certain point, you're tearing down, you're not helping. But I covered, aleatoric music, I range stuff, and literature, and everything. I tried to hit everything I could, and just seemed that was a requirement. And years later, if you look at Malcolm Gladwell, his book on outliers, he talks about
Mhm.
to become a master at any task, it takes 10,000 hours of consistent, diligent practice. And then we're not talking about playing. We're talking about consistent, diligent practice. And the more consistently you do things, the more consistent your results will be. So, for the people who just want to pick it up and play double C's, well, good luck. I mean, if you have that natural setup, but there's so much more than that. We have to cover. We don't have to cover, but how many times do you hear in an orchestra that, as they say, they couldn't swing from a rope, but come in there, you should be able to swing. You should be able to play, emulate, players that you admire that do what you want to do. I don't think anybody ever asked financial advice from somebody who's, living on a curb. By the same token, get your information from the source that you want to do. If you want to do a certain kind of thing, contact those people, get to know them, ask questions, pay for their support, to teach you. And I think you'll get much more than you ever bargained for if you do that.
Absolutely. Great advice. Great advice. And I should mention, so that question came from David Burt, who said, thank you. And he's a fellow Jayhawk as well. So.
Yes, he is.
That's why I love doing these things. It's great to see who shows up in the comments. You never know who's watching around the world and sharing advice. But what they say, success leaves clues. And there's two, obviously, the things that you're talking about. Obviously, people will learn from. But it's amazing the number of pro players that are here in the comment section, and you wonder how they got to where they are. It's because they're learning. They're still absorbing, at their stage. Mike Davis says hi. Hey, good.
Mike.
Oh yeah, it's like a family reunion here. It's awesome. Well, Jon, absolutely awesome having you on here.
Thank you.
For those of you viewing, I have the links down to Jon's podcast, episode 36, and also to the Star Wars Day extravaganza that we did 3 years ago with the whole section.
That was so fun.
Yeah, that was really awesome. So, again, great advice. Thank you, Jon, for being on today.
My great pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for joining us. What an amazing May the 4th be with you day. I mean, so much great information from Jon, both about studio stuff and playing and dedication. And we got him to play and give us some techniques and tips and things like that. Thank you for all the wonderful questions. And if you haven't done so, I can see who's watching and I can see who hasn't hit that like or love button on Facebook or that like or subscribe button on YouTube. So please go ahead and hit those. It means the world to us. And hope you'll join us for the next one. One last thing, for those of you on the East Coast, little quick plug here. Bob Reeves Brass, Brett and I will be joining Josh Landris at J. Landris Brass in New York City. This will be May 11th and May 12th. So next week we're hopping on the plane and we will be doing all of the mouthpiece things, all of the valve alignment things at Josh's wonderful shop there in Manhattan. So if you're viewing this from somewhere around New York City and you want to meet us in person and get a consultation, I hope you'll join us there. All the details for that will be at Josh's website, which is jlbrass.com. Other than that, that's all the plugs I have for today. Join us. Well, we won't do a live stream next week, so join us probably in a couple weeks for another wonderful Q&A with a guest to be announced. That's all for now. Bye-bye.